I'll be quiet. I'll be quiet.
All right. All right. So I want to thank everybody for coming on board. This is and can you mute yourself so we don't get any background sound? Thanks. This is can everybody just mute yourselves so that we limit the background noise? Thank you. This is a Project Dallas orientation. I scheduled it for 2 hours, but I don't think it's going to take that long. We have Jasmine Mayen. Is she here? From
Present.
there she is from
And
the support center.
Corin from support centers here too.
Who else is here from support center? Corin Wilkins. All right. So when you guys are doing a presentation, right?
Yeah, we have a brief overview.
All right, great. And then we have Christine, senior executive of all the attorneys in pro bono. I just keep making titles up for her. Then we have, that's my way of being funny, Kent. Then we then we have Kent Hansen, associate attorney, and Alexandra Kilduff, associate attorney, all from pro bono. We've been working closely together for the past couple of years. This is going to give you a sense of your responsibility in working with pro bono and your responsibility of working with Jasmine and the support center. Before I start, I want to make it perfectly clear that I will not execute the contract or execute the payment voucher until you are actively and consistently and replying back in a manner that makes us think that you are really working this. And once I get a report back from Christine, Alexandra, and Kent about your active participation, then I will execute the contract, and then I will execute the payment vouchers. So your access to your funding is directly tied to your active participation with pro bono and your active participation with the support center. So let's hold all questions to the end. And what I'll do now is I'm going to give Jasmine, Courtney, Kent, Alexandra, and Christine sharing superpowers, right? Let me make you all co-hosts. So that's Alexandra, and that's Christine, and then that's Kent, make co-host, and then that is Jasmine, make co-host, and then it is Corinne Wilkins, right? As co-host. So what we'll do first is we'll do the support center presentation, Jasmine. And then once you're done, hand it over to Christine. Christine will take it over from there, okay?
Sounds good.
All right.
Alrighty. Okay, thank you, Eddie. Hello, all. I think I've met with all of you, except for perhaps one group. And so a lot of what you're about to hear, you've already heard once, but just to be on a safe side, we'll go over it again. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. You can actually, Corin, if you don't mind kind of watching the chat to let me know if any questions pop up. Okay. So who Support Center is, you've already probably have an idea based off on our initial intake calls, but we're a capacity building organization. We have a bunch of different service areas. Our mission is to empower nonprofits and social enterprises to transform their leadership and management and advance our vision for social change. Our vision is long, so we won't go over it. But what we do, so we have strategy and management. So that's our kind of more in-depth consulting. We have executive transition. So we place a lot of leaders into organizations. We help with interim placements, meaning, that kind of space between a new ED and a continuing ED. We sometimes place somebody there in between. We have professional leadership development. So we have a lot of programs, a lot of workshops. All of you should have received our newsletter yesterday on this note that has both upcoming events as well as workshops. And we'll go over kind of your access to these workshops a little bit later. And then organizational navigation. So this is kind of what we're talking about here. So what that is. So we support long-term change in organizations using organizational coaching. You'll actually be working with us for only 9 months, but we do go up to 24 months a lot of times. And so our goal is to enable organizations to become agents of their own capacity building. And so I'm going to skip our strategic priorities, bothering me that it's out of place there. So what is organizational coaching? So what that is that we place navigators, so that's our network of nonprofit experts, into your organization. And as thought partners and third-party experts, they provide honest feedback and recommend best practices and courses of action. So we talked about some examples in our one-on-ones, but what this means and what this will mean for a lot of you will be that they'll be there to kind of help guide you as you're creating this program that OFBI is funding. So they'll be there to help guide you in this. I don't remember exactly what you call it, Eddie, but this kind of starter program or continuing of your initial programs. And with a lot of the organizations I've already spoken to, you guys are really looking at kind of how to expand or how to create maybe a location for your organization. These are all things that our navigators can talk through with you. The one thing that I want to clarify is that navigators are not consultants in a traditional sense. So what does that mean? That means they're not going to provide your organization with what we call deliverables. So for instance, a strategic plan or a fundraising plan. So they're not additional staff and they're not there to fundraise for you. So those are just two things that are really important. And then one thing that you should have received when you created a Zoom meeting with me was this organizational readiness survey. It was linked in kind of the first email. And if you didn't receive it, I'm going to follow up with this after this call. But this is just a few questions that we like to ask because that gives us an idea of where you as an organization are and how we can help and where we can kind of step in and support you guys. So our expectations in this program are that you will be there to speak with your navigators for 3 hours per month. We also asked that you give a one-on-one with me, which most of you already did, and then a one-on-one hour for familiarization with Basecamp. And Basecamp is something that I'm going to kind of send you after this call, but it's really just a place, it's a tool, an online tool where you can kind of upload documents. You can use that to share a resource if you're a navigator. And then after this engagement's done, it's still yours. You'll still be able to access Basecamp. So you can kind of use that as a platform within your organization, or you can say, I hated using this, I'm never going to look at it again. And that's also okay, it's yours. And then also communication. So our expectation that you'll respond to emails in a timely manner. You'll let us know, us being support center staff. So me, Keith, Corin, if you're having issues with your navigator, because what we really want is for you guys to have established relationship based on trust with your navigator, and that you're going to be able to fully utilize them by sharing what's going on. And on that note, there is a level of confidentiality. While I am reporting to Eddie about the meetings and the goals that you guys have, I am not reporting to Eddie on, one-on-ones. I'm not hearing any gossip. So just know that the relationship you have with your navigator is yours. And then also another really important thing is that we expect that you'll uphold your time commitment to your navigator, which means if you say I'm going to meet with you on Friday, you'll be there to virtually to meet with your navigator. And if something comes up, you let them know because that's just, that's not a great use of their time, your time and our time. So those are just some more communication expectations. And then some other things that we have is that hold on, let me go ahead and skip to support center resources. We've talked about workshops. So every organization that's coming through this Project Atlas or additional navigation engagement gets 5 passes. So that means, you know, uh, helping hands. You have like 5 opportunities to attend one of our workshops. And I'm going to click on this link. I hate the Zoom thing at the top. Let me see. So you can attend any of our workshops for free 5 times. And so you can look at what we have going on. This is our workshop page. It's also listed in that newsletter that you received yesterday. And if you're interested in attending and using up one of your passes, please email Gabby and I'll send this out as well to register for those. That's how you kind of get your free spot into our workshop. But you'll also get invitations to attend workshops where we have surplus seats. We don't always fill our workshops, and when we don't, we say, hello, this is open. Would you like to attend? It'll be in, 3 days. So some of our workshops include grant writing, financial management, public speaking, etc. You'll also get an invitation to apply for our new executive director training program. We do that twice a year. And then we have something called a leadership collaborative. The leadership collaborative I think it is maybe like a 6 to 8 kind of virtual meeting training. And it's really great. We have a lot of good consultants come through. Keith Timko, the Executive Director Support Center, often is one of the facilitators and trainers in that. So you can just learn a lot, make some great connections. And we do provide scholarships, especially for those of you that are coming through the Project Atlas engagement. You also get an opportunity to sign up for an office hour. Honestly, we are very happy to meet more than once with office hours. And that's just a little form that you fill out. Um, and we've had in the past organizations that had, every member of their board come through and talk about, what's keeping them up at night, and how, what resources are out there to support them. And so that's a really great resource. I really recommend it. It usually is held with Keith Timko, who I just mentioned, or one of our other consultants. So it's a really great opportunity for you guys. And then for those of you who have already been introduced, which I think is all but 4 groups, these are our navigators. So that was a really quick overview, mostly because I already had a 1-hour one-on-one with most of you. But if you have any questions, I'd love to go ahead and hear them. A riveting crowd. Come on, guys. Question time.
I have a question. So part of this process, Project Atlas grantees, is that you work with your navigators to identify a certain issue in your organization that you need that must be addressed, that it improves the capacity of your organization outside of funding. Because everybody and everybody's mother and father and uncle and grandfather and sister and brother and nephew, we need funding. We all know you need funding, but we also know there are other capacity issues that you need to address in order to get to that place where you can, get access to large dollar amounts. And so it's going to be really critical this year that you work with your navigator to try to identify. And I sent them your applications. And within your applications, you're asked to identify, what are the 3 areas or 4 areas of capacity that you think you need to address. And with your navigator, you'll hone down on 1 or 2, and then you'll work on that. And then I think you should really take advantage of the phone call, the office hours thing.
Mhm.
If you have a question, call them. They'll answer it. You fill out a form, they'll answer it. They'll call you back. A lot of you are new to being executive directors or leaders of nonprofits, and you need somebody, I think, that you can talk to that understands, the pain and heartache you're going to go through. We have a couple of questions. Melissa Reynolds.
Yes, well, it's not really a question per se, but you mentioned that the newsletter went out yesterday from Support Services. I'm
Yes.
sorry, Support Center. I don't recall receiving that email. Is it possible you can resend it to me?
Yeah, and Melissa, while I'm kind of once we kind of move on, I'll message you and let you know which email I have. So the emails that I am using are the ones that were provided from Eddie. So if you know that you prefer a different email and that's the one that you look at, and are going to be checking it on your phone or whatever, please let me know what that is. Because I will be sending a lot of information. If it just goes into the black abyss, then
Yeah.
there's a lot of good stuff in there. So let me know.
And I received other emails from you. I've just
Oh,
maybe
okay,
missed
perfect.
that one, but I'll double check again. But it definitely came from you, or is it coming from
It's
someplace else?
coming from marketing our newsletters come from marketing at supportcenteronline.org.
Okay, so I'll check. Maybe it went to spam. I'll check.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Melissa, just in case, can you insert your email in the chat? so that
Okay.
Jasmine can
Yeah.
get it. Frank, same thing with you. Frank is saying he didn't get it. Frank, can you and Mary Riley, Mary, can you insert your email in the chat so that Jasmine can pull it? All right. All right. Any other questions about Jasmine's presentation? M. Riley, everybody's in there? Okay. All right,
Hey,
Christine.
hey.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, somebody.
Yeah, I'm Kim. Okay, hey Jasmine. How are you? Quick question. So are all the trainings free for all the leadership team?
They're all free as long as you have your pass. So you have 5 passes, and anybody in your leadership and organization can use that pass. Um,
Awesome.
so if you wanted to attend one, but then your board chair or your vice chair wanted to attend a different one, you could do that. And I'll resend this presentation to the group. The thing to kind of remember in the workshops is that if you want to attend one, to let Gabriella, who's unfortunately she couldn't attend, she usually attends these. Gabby, Baria know that you want to register, and she can register you on the back end, because if you try to register through the normal website, it's going to ask you for a payment. So we'll register you on the back end. But yeah, so there's five passes that you can kind of use. Gabby keeps track of those. And like I mentioned, we do send out when we have surplus seats, and we just say, does anybody want to attend this? To just respond to that. And those emails will come from Gabby or her team. Ellie, our intern, our professional leadership development intern.
All right. The other thing, everyone, good question, Kimberly. As you're thinking about your budget, there are a couple of expenditures. There's one expenditure line item that you have to have is staff development. And you need to put in a staff development line item anywhere between $700 and $1,000. Right. That will then allow you, Kimberly and Miriam Heyer and Frank Cunningham, Shazel Muhammad, to get other people on your leadership team to get the training. Right. The other thing that I need you to think about also is when you're thinking about your budget, you all can get reimbursed for the insurance cost, the purchase of insurance. You can use this grant as a line item for insurance. You can also purchase technology up to 2,000, up to like I think it's $2,000 if you need laptops or some other desktop computer. So so when I'm in the process of coordinating these one-on-one meetings, and I'll get into more detail about that. All right. Any other questions for Jasmine and the support center team? All right, Christine, it's your show.
Thanks, Eddie, and hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. Eddie always saves the lawyers for this segment. He figures we're going to excite you and keep you awake. Um, as Eddie mentioned before, there's 3 of us here from Pro Bono Partnership on the phone. I'm Christine Duffy. I oversee the New Jersey office, and my 2 colleagues, Alexandra Kilduff and Ken Hansen, are 2 of our staff lawyers. The 3 of us normally help the OFBI grantees. This year, I'm not going to be helping the Project Atlas group because your work usually runs for a longer period of time during the fiscal year, and I'm retiring in the middle of November, and there's no point in having you start working with me and then have to transition to one of the other lawyers. I do apologize. It is a great loss. You won't be able to work with me, but you'll survive. Um, Ali, if you could put up the client overview document, that would be helpful. Um, Pro Bono Partnership provides free transactional legal services to other 501c3 charitable organizations in New Jersey, Connecticut, and the greater Lower Hudson Valley of New York, as well as on Long Island. We serve groups that are economically disadvantaged and who serve economically disadvantaged and traditionally underrepresented populations, enabling them to more effectively feed the hungry, house the homeless, protect the civil rights of individuals, promote the arts, and protect the environment, and to provide essential programs to, among others, children, the elderly, individuals with disabilities, the unemployed, survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, immigrants, and veterans. We help nonprofits with transactional matters such as contract and lease reviews, bylaw reviews, corporate governance and non-accounting tax issues, employment law. We do not get involved in lawsuits and administrative proceedings such as claims by employees before the EEOC or the Department of Labor. We do not represent individuals. We help just nonprofits. On our website, we have a lot of terrific resources for nonprofits, such as articles on tax and filing considerations for small nonprofits, charitable registration in New Jersey, and one of our newest publications, the Nonprofit Hiring Toolkit. We have on-demand webinars and a schedule of upcoming webinars that you can access via our website. We also have legal alerts posted on our website, and once we get you into our system, you'll automatically receive those documents. Separate and apart from the legal wellness checkup that we'll be talking about in a few moments, we'll be able to help your nonprofit for free with other legal issues. And I'm going to talk about the application process to become a client of ours. Our application does mention there's an application fee. We have waived that for the OFBI grantees. So when you read that, you can just skip over that part of the application. No charge. And after that, as I mentioned, we don't charge for our legal services. Alexandra, could you put up the list of the grantees? As I mentioned, we're having the legal work with your groups done by Alexandra and Kent, and we broke you up into two different groups of 5 grantees. You're all listed here, with the exception of African Link. None of you are a client of ours at this point. Urban Verde worked with us many years ago, but it's not a current client. So each of you are going to need to complete our application process, except for African Link. And Alexandra and Kent will be sending emails tomorrow to the folks that we have contact information for to give you the more particular details about what you're going to need to do. I put Alexandra and Kent's contact information into the chat. If you have the opportunity to just shoot them a quick email tonight or first thing tomorrow morning with your contact information, that would be helpful just to ensure that these emails reach the right person, because sometimes information changes from the time you submit your application and when we receive that information. So if you could do that, that would greatly help us making sure we get the information sent to the right person. So there's basically 2 steps involved in the work we're going to be doing with you. The first thing you're going to need to do is to apply to become a client. And the email that you'll get will have a link to our form to fill out. You complete the application online. When we receive it, we'll review it. The application form is also going to mention 7 or 8 different documents we need you to email to us. The application says to email the documents to information@probonopartner.org. You can ignore that. We would appreciate if you would email those documents directly to Alexandra or Kent so they get everything at one time. It would be great if you collect those documents to the extent you have them. After you collect them, complete the online application, and then right after that, send the email to Alexandra or Kent. Go ahead.
I'm just going to jump in for 1 second and say that we don't have access to the Sage system. I've had a couple of questions from organizations asking if I can access their documents that they've submitted to Sage. We have no connection to Sage, but if you want to just take the package that you uploaded to Sage and send it on, that's probably going to cover a lot of the documents we request. But yeah, we can't access your documents from Sage.
And there's a good reason for that. We want to maintain the attorney-client privilege. We don't want to be accessing their documents, and they're not going to be accessing our document database. It just provides a clear demarcation. And this also goes back to something that Jasmine mentioned. The stuff you discuss with us is going to be protected by the attorney-client privilege. So we're not going to turn around and discuss any substantive discussions we have with you with OFBI We might disclose certain information with the support center if you want us to have a conversation with them or one of their navigators about a particular issue that might be of common interest both to the support center and the pro bono partnership with our work with you. But we'll only do that with your express consent. So typically, we'll just be working one-on-one with your organization, not involving anybody else. So after you complete the application, Alexandra and Kent will review the materials. They may prepare some preliminary comments, send you an email with a request to set up a time for a call to discuss the application. After that call is over, we'll prepare our standard pro bono client engagement letter to send to you. Once we get that back executed by your executive director and a board member, you now become an official client of Pro Bono Partnership. Then you move on to step 2, which is the actual legal wellness checkup. That document, which you'll get in the email tomorrow, might seem a little imposing. It's long, but note that there's a bunch of pages at the end with some explanatory material. But the questionnaire itself is 18 pages long. And you're saying, oh my, that's really long. The reason it's that long is I'm visually impaired and I use large font and I put a lot of white space, lots of lines between bullet points and subsections. If the standard lawyer prepared this document for you, it'd probably be 4 to 6 pages, small font you can't read with no space. So don't get overly concerned about the length. In addition, you'll be able to answer most of the questions by simply checking yes or no. There's a few spots you have to put in some explanatory answers, but in general, it really should be something you should be able to complete within a couple of hours. If your handwriting is atrocious like mine is, we really would ask you to try to type in your responses. If a question makes no sense to you, don't hesitate to say that. I don't understand this question. Nothing wrong with that. We'll do everything in our power to try to make this as easy as possible for you to get through. Nothing in the questionnaire is designed to trick you or to make you look stupid. It's just designed for us to get some basic information that will allow us to help assess if your organization has any significant legal and compliance issues based solely on the responses that you provide us. The document also suggests certain documents that you may want to send to us to review. If you've already submitted some of those documents as part of step 1, you don't have to resubmit those documents. And what I'd like to tell folks, you have a lot of control over this process. We want to help you to the extent we can, and we want to give you as much help as you ask for. So the amount of effort that you put into completing the legal wellness checkup and deciding on what documents to send to us will have a direct and proportional impact on the quality of the work that we can do for you. So the more help you want, the more help we'll give you. And we'll try to do it in a way that'll be easy to understand and to digest. And if we identify things that might help you to improve your organization, you'll take a look at it and decide these are the issues we want help with. And Alexandra and Kent will work with you to prioritize which projects should be done first. We don't want to force you to open up 10 different things to work on at the same time. Identify 1 or 2 things to start with. Once you move on past those, we can open up additional matters. There's no timeline to complete those other projects down the road, but there is a timeline to get through this process of submitting the application. We really would like you to get that done within the next 2 weeks, sooner if possible. And then after you do that, you can start working on your questionnaire and hopefully can get us that within about 4 weeks after submitting the application. If at any time when you're going through this, you have any questions, any concerns, please don't hesitate to contact us. And that's one of the things we're going to try to do by sending you this email and trying to set up a call with you right away. We'll be able to address one-on-one any of the concerns that you might have about the process. I've been working with Eddie for 17 years. I've been at the partnership for 17 years, and I worked with Eddie from day one. And I think we've been doing these legal wellness checkups for at least 12 years.
Yep.
And my experience has been the groups who fought it the most, but then relented, at the end said, I didn't realize how valuable this would be. I learned so much about the things I didn't know. And that's a lot of what we do. We're lawyers. You're not lawyers. You're not aware of certain filing obligations and certain traps that you could step into. Just give you an example. I worked with one of the OFBI grantees yesterday. They've grown pretty substantially. They don't have a single employee. All their work is done by contractors. That's a major red flag if the Department of Labor were ever to audit that organization. It's almost impossible to have an organization that has no employees. And I can explain that at another time. So these are the type of things we're going to try to spot for you and say, hey, red flag here. It will give you some materials to read about what the issue is. And if you want more detailed help, then we'll line up volunteer lawyers to help guide you on those particular issues. Alexandra and Kent, do you want to add anything else? Okay.
No, I think you covered it.
Right. Then you're up to do your presentation. This is the really exciting part of the program now.
Get your popcorn out. Get your popcorn.
I was going to say, Eddie never is mistaken about anything, except perhaps how exciting a presentation on corporate housekeeping is. So I'm going to try to share my screen here.
And we're not coming out to clean your homes. Make sure you answer. That's not what we're going to be talking about.
Right.
So I don't know where I'm not seeing anybody, so I'm not sure I did a very good job of sharing my screen.
We don't see it, Kent.
Yeah, we don't see it.
So just the other exciting part of this is
Alexandra, you want to try to do it?
Is it the PDF?
Oh, wait a minute. I see what happened here.
Okay.
But what did I do wrong?
We're lawyers. We're not very technically sophisticated. Well, Alexandra's an exception.
I was
when it
going to
comes to
say, I was like,
technology.
hold on. I got it. Hang on. Hang on.
You got it?
Yeah, 1 second. See here.
I mean, I can go back and get it set up again. I don't know what I did
I got it.
wrong. It's typical.
I've
Kent
got
and
it.
I grew up in a generation of rotary telephones
They're
and the
saying.
buggy, the horse and buggy.
Do you guys want me to share that document?
It's
We
just
want to
taking
get
a
the
minute to
PowerPoint
load for me. It'll be up momentarily.
Okay. That's the PDF document, right, Kent, that you sent me?
Well, we're going to do
No,
the actual PowerPoint.
I have the actual Excel spreadsheet, and I had it down in my link. I don't know what happened to it. Ali, are you getting it up here?
I have
Or-
the PDF version if
Want me to go back and try to get mine?
sure.
I have it here. Let me see if I can pull it up. Let's see. Let's see if I have 3 screens. I don't know how this is going to work.
Kent, you got us on pins and needles.
Does this
You're not disappointing. This presentation is not disappointing.
See, I knew that.
Let me try to find it here. I'll drag it to my desktop.
I think I have it up here, but I got to get to the slideshow.
You have the PowerPoint. I have the PDF version. So
Yeah, I've never shared a screen before.
Oh, for crying out
there we
loud.
go.
Can everybody see this?
Yep.
Yep, perfect.
Well,
Got it.
now I'm not seeing it. So, oh, jeepers.
Well, you just
Okay,
announced the
that looks
slide
like
you
it.
need,
Am I going to
Kent.
be able to move the slides? I guess not, huh?
Alexandra
No,
will do that.
you can just cue me. That's fine.
Okay, so my apologies to everybody. That was probably the most exciting part of this, was trying to get the screen sharing done. As one of the things that Christine mentioned that we work very hard to do is to take a look during the checkup process at what your current state of corporate governance is. And then we work with you to kind of address anything that may not be sort of the best practices. And one of the things that we talk about here in the orientation meeting here is the subject of corporate housekeeping. We try to help you improve your governance processes. And corporate housekeeping is a way of supporting and documenting those good governance practices, and also it helps to really boards to become engaged with running their organization. So I think you've gotten, even though I couldn't get it up on shared here, you've gotten a copy of our PowerPoint here, and I'm just going to go through this rather quickly. We're going to go and start at slide 7. The first few slides are just related to pro bono partnership, which we've already gone through. And so we'll just start on slide 7, which goes over, this is a brief overview of what we're going to do in terms of the agenda. We're going to provide an overview of the role of the nonprofits board. It's a background to how good housekeeping can help the board meet its responsibilities. And then we'll move on to describe what kind of corporate housekeeping basics are, and the best way that you can address the corporate housekeeping basics to document the board's action and document your good governance. So next slide, please. Kind of a brief overview here of the role of the board in corporate governance. So in the most general sense, the board oversees and guides the nonprofit. The boards of trustees are really the strategic big picture thinkers of an organization. If nonprofits have no staff, boards may actually be running the day-to-day operations, but by definition, they should still be always thinking about the big picture. And hopefully that nonprofit will be growing. And to Christine's point, will be adding staff as it grows, and will be just purely doing an oversight function. It's important that a board ensures that the nonprofit is operating. Okay, I guess I can try to answer these questions as we go. I'll do this as quickly as we can. Can you put that up again, Al? You wanted to know if a board number should be odd or even. I'll just say that it really doesn't matter. I think the important thing is the board to work as a team and make sure that they have really good discussions about any issues that are coming before the board. We do see some bylaws occasionally that say the board chair has 2 votes in case there's a tie, and having 2 votes is not consistent with what's in the nonprofit corporation statute here in New Jersey, and it's not consistent with anyone that I'm aware of. If there's a tie, you should really continue the discussions to get to a point where the majority can come up with a decision. But it doesn't really matter if you have odd or even numbers, but the point is to act as a team and to come up with decisions that the majority can support. And it's important for a board to make sure that the nonprofit's operating in line with its charitable mission. That's going to be part of what's in your certificate of incorporation. It's also going to be something that the IRS remains very active about. So you got to make sure the mission is being fulfilled and that you don't go off in some direction that's not part of the mission that you've notified the IRS about. The boards also take care of a nonprofit's assets and serve as risk managers. So they need to make sure that there are financial controls in place. They need to make that the nonprofits are utilizing his assets properly, and that they're protected. Provided you can afford it, you need to make sure that you've got insurance, adequate insurance to cover your nonprofit's assets. You should be reviewing the annual budget. First of all, you should be preparing an annual budget as a part of good governance, and then you should be reviewing that periodically to make sure that you're complying with what you thought the organization was going to be doing, or if you're not, that the board can make a decision that this is in the best interest of the nonprofit. And then ultimately, boards will hire staff and they'll just oversee and see that the organization is being managed well. They don't just actually manage it day to day themselves. So on the next slide. So what is corporate housekeeping? So particularly with new nonprofits, really very often the board members are not familiar with corporate housekeeping and really don't have a lot of knowledge about things like preparing an agenda, running a meeting, documenting what occurred at the meeting and things like that. It's not rocket science, but if you haven't done it before, there is a learning curve to doing it properly and well. So good corporate housekeeping provides a framework or a process for establishing, implementing, and documenting your good governance for your nonprofit. And it's also a structure or managing your board's activities. So as an example, the board has to determine as a board the number of members that would really be efficient and make for an effective board. Things like the number of meetings you ought to have to make sure that you're performing good oversight on the nonprofit. The way you're going to conduct the meetings and the information that you want at the meetings. And that includes, what staff you want to show up at the meetings. And it includes things like preparing, kind of simple things like preparing meeting agendas, preparing the resolutions that the board's going to act upon, and that demonstrate or document what the board's action was. You're going to want to take minutes of your meetings for both the board and any committees. Excuse me. You'll want to use housekeeping to document the proper handling of sensitive or difficult situations. So, for example, conflicts of interest can often come up where a board member or somebody else that's kind of connected with the organization might have a financial. There is a way to combat that and look at it and make sure that if there is a conflict of interest, you address it properly. And then you will want to document the way you did take a look at that conflict and the way you resolved it. So also, and then finally, establishing a process to ensure that all required filings are made on behalf of the nonprofit. So, for example, if you don't file your annual report with the state of New Jersey, they'll just make your corporation inactive, which is not something you would want to have happen. So moving on to housekeeping basics. The board acts as a group and has to meet together to be engaged in oversight of the nonprofit. As I said earlier, you really have to make sure your board is going to operate as a team. We at Probono Partnership deal with more than a few boards that are butting heads, and it really is not a helpful way to be running your organization efficiently. Your fiduciary responsibilities to the organization. So you should be holding board and membership meetings if you happen to be a membership organization, and to meet together and make the decisions that are necessary to run the organization. In holding those meetings, you need to comply with statutory requirements and then, requirements that are in your bylaws. There can be notice requirements, how much notice you have to give to board members before to let them know when the meeting is going to be conducted. Requirements as to quorum, in other words, how many board members need to show up in order for the meeting to actually operate and make decisions, and also the voting requirements to make decisions. And Most often, the voting requirements on day-to-day operations will be presented in the bylaws. There are statutory requirements that will require specific voting requirements for special things such as, I don't know, mergers or just taking a significant corporate action. There may be something in the New Jersey statute that tells you you've got to have either 2/3 vote, for example, or you have to have a vote of a majority of all the board members, not just the board members that show up at the meeting. We think it's important to send an agenda in advance of the meeting, so your board members are going to know what's going to be discussed. And to the extent it's not confidential, it's also important to provide relevant information ahead of the meeting. So the board can kind of review that and make sure they're prepared with questions for, the folks that they invite to the meeting to provide information on day-to-day activities. And then you need to be making sure that you record and retain meeting minutes permanently. I think even the IRS addresses the fact that they expect 501c3 organizations to maintain minutes of their meetings permanently. And you also have to retain certain corporate records. So the IRS requires public charities to provide copies of their last three Form 990s. They also require that if somebody comes up and wants to see your determination letter or wants to see the Form 1023 that you filed to become a public charity, that you have to provide that to them. You're legally obligated to do that. And then if you look at the bottom of this slide, the last bullet point, one of the most useful points on this slide is to help the nonprofit comply with its governance requirements is to create a corporate calendar. And that shows the dates for regular meetings, shows the dates that your periodic filings are required and other significant requirements. The nonprofit should assign responsibility for taking care that things that are shown in the corporate calendar are done on a timely basis. Next, on the next slide. So, board meetings. The board should, as a board, decide how the meetings and other housekeeping matters are going to be handled. We do see occasionally, or maybe more than occasionally, references to Robert's rules in a set of bylaws. We don't think that that's a very productive thing to do because most of the time when we ask a client if they have a copy of Robert's rules, they say no. And so the real outcome of incorporating Robert's rules could be that you really, when you make a decision, if people disagree with that decision and it wasn't made in accordance with Robert's rules, it won't count. So the board really can decide on how the meetings are going to be operated. They can discuss things like how to handle motions and seconds, the amount of time for discussion and similar items, and decide what's most efficient for this particular board. The board should also decide what information it wants to be reviewing at all the board meetings mentioned before. Always, we absolutely recommend that you have financial information at each of your meetings. And also, if you have a staff that is there to provide information on the financials and other program matters, what staff should be coming to the meetings to provide the information you want to see. And then we really recommend that a board meet annually to review its own performance and find out whether maybe there are ways that the board might improve that performance, including perhaps meeting more often, whether you should be establishing committees to take some of the workload off the board. Maybe you should have an advisory board to address certain specific issues. Advisory committee, I'm sorry. So the board can take a look at how it thinks it's operating and correct whatever it thinks is not a good practice for that particular board. Next slide. So agendas, we recommend you send an agenda in advance so all of the members know what's going to be considered. We have here, there is a bullet point here on a consent agenda, and this is just a way to kind of move the meeting along. Items that come up at every single meeting, like the minutes of the previous meeting, committee reports, those kinds of things. You could bundle them all into one agenda item. Make sure you provide them to the board members in advance, and they can approve those all on one motion. Unless, of course, one of the board members would like to discuss it. The last bullet point here speaks in terms of conflicts of interest. There should be on the agenda. If there happens to be a conflict of interest that's going to be considered at the meeting, that should be reflected on the agenda. And I've seen some agendas that really make sense to me that they just as a matter of standard practice put conflicts of interest as an agenda item for every meeting to make sure that the board members think about that before they come to the meeting so that it can be discussed. You have to make sure that whether it's in a consent agenda or separately, that if you do have committees, board committees, that there be a report of that board committee at a report at a meeting of the full board, and that helps to ensure that the board knows what's going on in the committee. Committees that have actually board powers can only be populated by board members, but still you need to come and report to the full board on what your committee's been doing. And then it really is important to address these at a meeting, or perhaps you even go into executive session to work through the conflict of interest. Important to think about adopting a conflicts of interest policy. There are templates. The IRS provides a template conflict of interest policy for 501c3 organizations. And you should make sure you go through and document how you made a decision that the decision is going to be in the best interest of your organization. On the next slide, we talk about the meeting materials. So as I said previously, unless confidential, you should send them in advance so the board has a chance to look at them before they show up at the meeting. And it's particularly effective to have the confidential, the financial information out in advance so that the board members can really see how you're doing against the budget, see how your balance sheet looks, and see how your income statement looks, and be ready to be able to ask questions to the folks on the ground who can provide sufficient information to make sure you're up to speed on how the organization's operating financially. Next slide. Again, you should have operations and finance reviews at every meeting and have personnel there that what is an example of a confidential draft resolution is a question that we just got in the chat. I'm going to try to bring that up quickly a little bit later on. I'm going to talk about executive session. Resolutions, we can certainly provide templates of what typical resolutions look like. And there is not a resolution that actually is a confidential resolution, at least in my way of thinking. But there are times when you can go into executive session and only the board members are there in executive session unless they invite somebody else. And you can make decisions, for example, on a conflict of interest in that executive session, adopt a resolution in that executive session, and don't include that in the minutes of the regular meeting. You just show in the regular meeting executive session, and then at some point you came out of executive session. And so you keep that the decisions made in executive confidential, if that makes sense under those particular circumstances. And so you're welcome. So I kind of got out of order here, which I'm not very good at addressing, frankly. So the executive session was going to be my conversation on the last bullet point, but I'll just say a few more things about it. If you're going to go into executive session, you make sure that if your CEO or executive director isn't on the board, make sure they understand why you're going into executive session so there's no disagreement or misunderstanding and you don't end up with any headbutting about the executive session. Very often you'll go into executive session to kind of think about the CEO's salary, for example, and things that you really don't want to have a staff member attending. If your CEO is on the board, of course, that's not an issue. It's also executive session is not a bad place to go if the board is really butting heads and you really need to have a candid conversation about how the board is acting. As I said previously, you should keep minutes of the executive session, but don't keep them or put them in the minutes of the regular meeting. And just indicate that the board did, in fact, go into executive session, then came out after it was finished. And pretty much like the conflicts of interest policy, I have seen actually agendas that call for executive session at every meeting. And this kind of is used so that there's no misunderstanding with the staff and senior executives about the fact that you're going into executive session. So on the next slide, we talk about documenting board action. And there are requirements in the statute, and the board, typically puts in the bylaws issues with respect to quorum and voting requirements necessary to take action. Generally, a motion and a second are required for the board to consider an action. And the second for the motion is really just to be sure that at least one person has an interest in discussing that particular issue and voting on it. And there should be specific resolutions prepared and adopted that describe what specific action the board has taken. And very often, those specific resolutions are included with the agenda. If it's not confidential, a board can also take action by unanimous written consent. And as it indicates here, that it has to be in writing, and all of the board members have to agree with the action. You can do this by email, but you need to make sure you put a good policy in place or process in place so that the specific action is very clear in the emails sent out to the board members. And then the board members all have to approve that action and send the email back to the organization. And then you just make copies of all of those documents and put them in the corporate records. We talked about documenting the conflicts of interest. It's really important to do that in perhaps a more specific way than you or you talk about other things that went on at the meeting, because it may come up someday that somebody wants to look at how you handle this particular matter, and having a document that reflects the thought given to it, the issues that went into making the decision, and then ultimately that the decision was made in the organization's best interest. It's good to have those documents available. A bullet here on documenting dissent by a board member. This really takes some thought. Since the board acts as a team, if you're a board member and you're really not particularly happy with an action that the board's taken, but you're in the minority, since the board does act as a team, and the board, a majority of the board has approved this particular action, you really need to support that action going forward. Only if there's really a specific reason why you want your dissent from the action documented in the minutes, should you bring that up, and should the board consider perhaps documenting it. This is a little one. I used to be on a school board for a number of years, and it was always very frustrating that people who didn't agree with what the majority of the board wanted to do on an issue would. These days, I guess they go onto Facebook and other stuff and make comments about it, and it's really kind of inappropriate, I think. And okay, I think we can move to the next slide there. So minutes, again, we've talked about this already, but the purpose of the minutes is to document the actions and decision-making of the board. And the next few slides here are going to provide pointers on keeping board and committee minutes, and they evidence how the board was engaged, how it acted, and how that action fulfilled the board's legal and fiduciary responsibilities. It's important to remember that minutes are a legal document and they can be used as evidence, for example, at some sort of a hearing or a trial. And the minutes provide information about when the meeting occurred and what action was taken during the meeting, you know, the votes, the issues, the motions, the votes, and those kinds of, that kind of information. Preparing the minutes, you should have the name and date, name of the organization, date of the meeting, the board members who attended, and perhaps who were absent and excused, statement of whether there was a quorum present, general description of the matters discussed, the motion of the action taken. One of the things to remember is that minutes are really not a transcript. They should just be a summarization of what occurred and the action taken by the board. There was a time when we would always suggest to boards that, you know, after the meeting is over, you should collect any notes or other documents that people prepared at the meeting and you know, shred them and get rid of them, because the minutes should be the only documentation with respect to the meeting. Of course, you can't do that anymore because having their meetings on Zoom is a way to remember that. So here's a question. What are your thoughts on using Zoom AI or others for minutes? Well, if you want me to talk about AI, once again, I'll go back to what Christine said about rotary phones. But you should not be using something like AI to put together minutes of what occurred at a meeting. That would make absolutely zero sense to me.
So I can actually speak to this a little bit. A lot of people use Firefly's AI note taker for Zoom meetings, and a lot of people use that for their governance meetings as well. You should be aware that if it's downloading to a website, right? Because typically with a program like Firefly's, it takes the transcript of the meeting and it actually records the meeting. So it's not just a transcript, it's also a recording. And then it downloads it onto the Firefly's website, for instance. And most AI note takers do the same thing. I don't think there's any guarantee that anything that is putting a recording of your voices and a transcript of what you talked about onto a website that you do not have to log into to take a look at those items, because I do not have to log into the meetings where I've had somebody using Fireflies to see what I said. That's not confidential. Anybody could figure that one out or get access to that at some point. So I think that we'd probably highly discourage AI note taking for meetings if you want to have any semblance of privacy for that. It's also worth noting that if you are having meetings with us at Probono Partnership or with any lawyer, that lawyer is not going to consent to having you use AI note taking for the conversations that you're having with that person. It's also worth noting that it's unlawful to record somebody without their consent in New Jersey. There's no unilateral recording. And Fireflies records you. It doesn't just take notes for you, it records you speaking. And not everybody knows that. And it's not clear when Fireflies is on that that's what's happening. So they're really just not a great idea unless everybody's very familiar with the consequences of how they work.
Thank you, Ellen. And so once the minutes are finalized, they're typically sent to the board members for approval at the next meeting. Any corrections are made at the next meeting, and then they are ultimately final and filed away. And the IRS, as I indicated earlier, has indicated in compliance guides that minutes have to be kept permanently, and they should be. On the next slide, it's still, I think, referring to minutes. Okay. Is this the next slide? Here we are. Yes, no. No, the next slide after this one, Ally, or am I missing this? Yeah, committee meetings should follow the same procedure as boards in terms of taking and maintaining minutes. Remember, the work of the board is confidential unless you happen to be subject to the Open Public Meeting and Open Public Records Act, although the current governor seems to be going back on that. But that, again, that the minutes should be the exclusive record of what transpired at the meeting, as I mentioned earlier. And they have to be retained permanently and accessible to the entire board. And the last slide talks about corporate records. And so this has bullet points here, a list of the corporate records that every nonprofit and its board have to be able to put their hands on. Again, going through the minutes, documents that manifest action of the board, your certificate of incorporation and bylaws. You can, maybe prepare a board book so that all board members have copies of those documents. Your IRS determination letter, Form 1023 that you filed with the IRS should be kept permanently. They have to be kept permanently because you have to disclose them to people who require or request them. And also, as I pointed out earlier, the fact that you need to have 3 years of 990s that you are able to provide to anyone who asks. Okay.
I think I just
that's-
jumped the gun there. I apologize. Let me put that back up for you.
I just want
that's
to add
okay.
one other
No,
thing
we're done. Yeah, we're done.
I suspect most of your organizations are relatively new in terms of receiving 501c3 status from the IRS. Most of the new nonprofits I work with, I'll ask them if they ever heard about IRS publication 4221-PC. They have no clue what I'm talking about. It's a document that's actually referenced in the IRS determination letter that a nonprofit receives. It's really an important document for you to read if you haven't done it. So if you just Google IRS publication 4221-PC, you'll pull it up. It's the roadmap for what the IRS expects you to do. And I would highly commend that to all of you.
Christine, Shazel wanted to know, can you send a list of these items in a draft corporate calendar? Is that something that you guys provide?
I just responded.
Okay.
That's part of the audit. So yeah, everybody gets that when they work with us.
All right.
It's publication 4221-PC. 4221-PC.
There you go.
There's the link right there. Okay.
Mariam put the link in the thing. Christine, I sent you a question directly to you. You can follow up with the African links on that. Not here, one-on-one.
Okay, I don't see that, so I'm not
You
sure
don't see
here.
that? Let me send it again.
Actually, send it to Kent, because I think Kent's working with that group. Yeah, Kent.
All right. All right, Ken, I'm gonna send you this. Any other questions, anybody? Are we good to go? All right, hold on for a second.
Ken?
Yes.
Yes, I was meant to tell you the third Frank Cunningham has been here for a while. She's a little better looking than me and Royce. It's Tasha Hall. She's the vice president.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello,
All right.
Frank.
Hey, Kent, I just sent you
Oh, I see that. Yeah, I got it,
question.
Eddie. Yeah.
Jasmine, American Muslims for Democracy is not here. Every year we have a problem child, and I think that one is our problem child. So I gotta follow up with that. All right, everybody. If there aren't any questions, Christina, you good to go? Kent, Alexander, you guys good to go?
Yep, we're good to go.
Jasmine,
Yeah.
you and your other partner good to go?
Um, yeah, so I have a draft email. I'll finish kind of attaching things and send it tomorrow. Just one heads up, and I'll be out of office October 3rd through November 1st. So hope my plan is to get all of you matched. I think I messaged a few of you just seeing how your initial conversations went. I know a few of you have already been able to meet with your navigator. So the rest of you, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm kind of confirming availability. So by the end of this week, ideally, we can kind of I'll send an introduction to who your navigator is. Once again, it is not me. And then, just hopefully you can schedule a initial call to see that they're a good fit. And then when my absence, Corin, who's on this call, Corin, are you still on this call? Yeah, she's here. Corin will be able to answer questions as well as Carolyn Champ, our associate executive director. Okay.
All right, Shazel, follow up with Ken Hansen on that question. All right. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. An hour and 15 minutes. We did good. Have a good night. Be safe. Some hurricane storms supposed to be coming tomorrow. Let's try to stay warm, enjoy. And we'll follow up with you in the next couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.